They called me a coward because I did not respond when my son-in-law threw a glass of wine at my face during the Christmas party. The whole room laughed, blood flowed, and I simply stood up, wiped the wine, and smiled. They did not know that the very moment I stayed silent, their lives had already changed direction. If you have ever been looked down on, ever been seen by your own family as a burden, ever stood in your own house feeling like a stranger, then do not leave this video. Before we continue, please hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment the name of the city you're listening from. Because every story here will remind you that silence does not kill anyone. It only makes those who once despised you hear the sound of their own collapse. People say Christmas is a time for gratitude. But that night, inside the brightly lit villa in Cedar Hollow, I, Raymond Foster, realized that some parties are not meant to thank anyone, but to show who holds power in the family. I arrived when the first snow had just fallen. The paved road into the neighborhood shimmered under golden lights, and from inside came the sound of a violin. Every glass window reflected laughing faces, people clinking glasses together sharply. Lydia, my daughter, came out to greet me, her lips red, her dark blue evening dress far from the image of the girl who once wore a wool coat on the snowy field. "Dad, you came too early," she said, her voice both cheerful and uneasy. "I did not want you to wait," I replied, then asked softly, "How many people are at the party?" "About 20, mostly Grant's guests. Bank directors, a few investors, and his father." I stopped at the door. "Arthur Harlow is here too?" "Yes. Grant said he wanted to meet you." I nodded, saying nothing more. The living room opened like a small theater. The Christmas tree reached the ceiling, candlelight reflected on crystal glasses, and jazz music blended with the smell of expensive wine. Grant stood in the center holding a glass, telling a joke. Beside him was Arthur Harlow, the man Grant worshipped like an idol. When he saw me, Grant just smiled faintly. "Father Foster, you made it. Come in. Everyone's waiting for the toast." Father Foster, not Dad. I looked around. Everyone was Grant's people. A few faces I recognized, those who once came to my old farm to buy milk, now wore black suits and looked at me like a stranger. Arthur approached and offered his hand. "Mr. Foster, a pleasure. I heard you co-signed the loan for this house. A rare gesture." I shook his hand and answered slowly, "Because I believe my daughter deserved a good start." "And your son-in-law surely knew how to take advantage of that," Arthur said, half joking. Laughter burst around us. I smiled lightly, though a cold sting rose in my chest. I remembered clearly. 3 years ago, when they wanted to buy this house, the bank refused because Grant and Lydia lacked credit. I was the one who signed as co-signer for a $640,000 loan, using the old Foster farm as secondary collateral. "I'm only helping you get the loan," I had told Grant, "but paying it back is your responsibility." Grant laughed. "Don't worry, Dad. I will not disappoint you." Now, watching him among the crowd, that smile looked slick and empty. Dinner began. I chose to sit at the head of the table, a habit of the Foster family. Lydia quietly pulled the chair for me, but Grant stopped her. "Wait, Lydia. That seat tonight is for my father." The room went silent. I looked up. "What did you say?" Grant smiled. "My father is the guest of honor. I want him to sit at the head." "I have always sat here," I said calmly. "Not for the position. It's just a habit, like how Lydia's mother likes sitting by the window." Grant lowered his voice, still loud enough for all to hear. "Dad, times change. Arthur runs the bank that is funding my new project. He deserves it more." I saw Lydia lower her head. The guests, those so-called partners, exchanged faint smiles, the kind that pierced deeper than knives wrapped in velvet. "Reality," I repeated. "Your reality is to humiliate the man who guaranteed your loan for this house." Grant tightened his grip on the glass, his tone turning cold. "You're bringing up money at Christmas dinner? I thought you came here for joy, not for debt talk." I set my napkin down, ready to leave, but Grant stepped closer, his hand on my shoulder, his eyes glacial. "You're in the wrong seat. You see, in the real world, the man with the bank keys decides who sits at the head." He pressed my shoulder, not hard but deliberate, so everyone could see an old man being moved aside for power. The chair tipped, I lost balance, and the wine glass fell, shattering. Red wine spread across the white tiles, and quiet gasps filled the room. A woman whispered, "Oh my God!" while Arthur frowned, silent. I stood upright, back straight, and eyes sweeping the table. 20 faces, some pity, some curiosity, some enjoyment. Lydia moved, but Grant said quickly, "Don't make a scene. I just slipped." I smiled, a calm smile. Even I would later wonder how I managed. "Yes, I slipped," I said, dabbing the blood where the glass had cut my hand. "But don't worry, I didn't stain your chair." The air froze. The music stopped. Candles still burned, but no one spoke. I quietly moved to the far end, pulled a chair, and sat. Lydia stood motionless, eyes red. Arthur raised his glass to ease the tension. "Come, let's continue. Tonight is for celebration." Grant poured wine, forcing a smile. "Yes, to the future." I sat still, not eating, watching the dinner like a play where I had become a background actor. They toasted, spoke of profits, projects, banks, things I once saw as tools, which they now treated as the measure of a man. When the party ended, I rose to leave. Arthur shook my hand. "Don't be upset. Grant's under pressure. The bank is reviewing his credit line. He just wanted to impress me before the board." I replied, "I'm not upset. I'm just sad. Because some children think they're pleasing others while losing their own self-respect." Arthur said nothing more. On the porch, Lydia clung to my arm. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know Grant would do that. He's been stressed for weeks about the Pinecrest project. If it fails, the bank will cut funding." I looked at her gently. "You don't need to apologize. A man can lose money or a contract, but never his character. I'm only sad you're living with someone willing to trade his dignity for the word success." The cold wind whipped through the porch, carrying away the lingering music. Through the window, I saw Grant shaking hands. Bowing to Arthur, I thought that man was once like a son to me, but from this moment on, he is a stranger. I walked to my car. On the road, my phone buzzed. A message from the bank. "Reminder, co-signer liability. Property at Cedar Hollow. Review due January 5th. I stared at it for a long time, then selected Megan Alvarez's number. Her voice came through the night. "Mr. Foster? Merry Christmas," I said. "Christmas? No. From now on, this is the day I stop believing in blood and start believing in signatures." "What did you say?" "I want to cancel all guarantees for Grant Harlow, and on the 26th, we begin again. Not a project, but justice." I hung up, watching snow fall on the windshield. Outside, the golden light still glowed, but inside me, only a cold, perfect white remained. They think I'm just a gentle old farmer, but they forget the man who once built a farm through a snowstorm also knows how to rebuild justice in winter. The next morning, the snow fell more heavily. All of Cedar Hollow was covered in a pale white like frost. I made coffee and sat by the wooden window, looking out over the field that had been the Foster farm for 40 years. Steam rose from the ceramic cup, touched the glass, and vanished, much like how my pride had dissolved under the lights of last night's Christmas. No one knew I had been pushed out of my seat. The photos they posted on social media only showed wine, smiles, golden lights, no me in the frame. But I did not need anyone to know. Some humiliations require no witnesses. The silence of the one humiliated is testimony enough. I opened my old leather notebook, and a photograph of my wife, Marion, fell out from between the pages. She had been gone 10 years, but whenever I saw young people in that house using the name family to show off, I remembered her warning. If one day I am not here, you must teach the children where the limits of gratitude lie. Last night I saw that limit trampled with a wine glass and laughter. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, the phone rang. Megan Alvarez, my lawyer, called back, as promised. Mr. Foster, I have done a preliminary check on the mortgage files for the Cedar Hollow house. You are the primary co-signer, and you have the right to revoke within 10 days if you wish to stop the guarantee. But, are you sure? I'm sure, I answered evenly. I do not want a man who looks down on others by virtue of financial power to keep relying on my signature. Understood. I will send the termination of the continuing guarantee form for you to sign. After notarization, we will have to wait until the 26th, because the bank is closed for the holiday. Good. Schedule it for that morning. I will be there. I hung up, opened my laptop, and logged into the trust fund account. Foster Agricultural Fund. More than $500,000 still sat there, enough for me to live out the rest of my days without needing anyone. But what stung was that Grant's name still appeared as successor trustee, the person who would take over if I died. The very man who had pushed me to the cold floor in front of 20 people was legally set to inherit control of my assets. I slowly opened the edit section. The system asked for confirmation. Are you sure you want to remove the beneficiary name? I clicked yes. My hand did not shake, only felt cold. A notification appeared. Change pending legal verification by Alvarez & Co. Done. He had just lost his right without even knowing. At noon, I called Tobias Crane, an old friend who had once worked with me on the Iowa Track maintenance crew. Tobias now worked as a private investigator based in Des Moines. Ray, what trouble are you into now? His voice rasped, like cigarette smoke. Not trouble. A lesson. For whom? For the son-in-law I once treated like a son. Tobias snorted. I bet money's involved. Right. I need you to check every loan under Grant Harlow's name. Also, any subsidiary account at Prairie State Savings. I want to know who he owes, how much he owes, and if there are any projects listed in my name that I did not authorize. You think he's abusing the credit? I do not think. I just want to make sure that when I pull my hand away this time, he has nowhere to cling. Tobias's voice turned serious. I'll do it quietly. But Ray, how far are you willing to go? Not far, just far enough for them to see they crossed the line. In the afternoon, the sky went heavy and gray. I drove to the edge of town to the familiar notary's office on Court Street. Linda Crane, Tobias's wife, worked there. I signed 2 documents, revocation of guarantee and amendment of trust beneficiaries. Linda peered over her silver-rimmed glasses. I've never seen you sign so quickly. I smiled. When you realize you trusted the wrong person, you do not need long to decide. On the way home, I stopped by the old shop, the place where I used to sell fresh milk each morning. The young clerk, new to the job, did not know me and only greeted me politely. I bought the cheapest bottle of bourbon and stood looking across at the coffee shop, where Grant used to brag about signing his first contract. Back then I had been proud, as if truly his father. Now it was different. I was no one's father. I was simply the man reclaiming the name I had given away too easily. Night came quickly. I sat on the porch while the wind slammed cold against my face. The wind through the wooden fence sounded like the hiss of the past. The years I believed kindness alone would prevent betrayal. On the table, the photo of my wife and Lydia, as a child, lay under the lamp's gold light. I looked at my daughter's face, still gentle, still hesitating between love and fear. I was not angry at her. Part of me knew Lydia was trapped between love and Grant's control, but I also knew, if I did not act now, Grant would teach my child that money and power measure filial duty. I could not allow that to happen, not while my name remained on bank records. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, Tobias texted, Ray, quick check done. Grant has 3 subsidiary loans, a personal one for $85,000, an investment for $120,000, currently underwater, and a subsidiary account using the foster fund name. He used your guarantee to open a corporate credit line. You may have been exploited for a long time. I read each word slowly. The pieces began to fit. No wonder he was tense last night, trying to flatter his father. If Arthur cut funding, the whole pile of debt would collapse. I typed back, "Thanks. Keep it quiet. Maintain secrecy." Then I turned the phone off, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling. The clock ticked on, each beat cold as the breath of justice counting down. I closed my eyes. I saw Grant bowing before Arthur, pouring wine, grinning like a victor. I felt no hatred, only a dangerous emptiness, because emptiness can make a man do things he never imagined before. When the clock struck 9, I opened my eyes, took a pen, and wrote in the notebook, "Cedar Hollow. Plan. Start, 26th of December. End, when honor is restored." I put the pen down and told myself, sometimes silence is not weakness. It is the wind, and wind, when cold enough, can freeze an entire counterfeit empire. They slept on, believing financial power was a blanket thick enough to keep them warm. But on the morning of the 26th, when the bank opened, they would learn. The cold wind would come from the very person they thought had long since lost his fire. On the night of December the 25th, Cedar Hollow was as silent as an abandoned church. Snow kept falling, covering the driveway before the porch. I could not sleep. The more I tried to close my eyes, the clearer I saw last night. The sound of the glass shattering, the awkward laughter, and Grant's eyes, half defiant, half pitying. I used to think betrayal was when someone lied behind your back. Now I know true betrayal is when someone humiliates you to your face and still believes you will forgive them. I got up and lit the lamp. The soft golden light spread across the wooden desk where I had already arranged the documents. On top was revocation of continuing guarantee, Prairie State Savings. Beneath it, I clipped the $640,000 loan agreement with the bold line, co-signer, Raymond Foster. I took my pen and signed where Megan had placed a red label. The feeling was strange, not relief, but as if I were closing the lid on a coffin for a part of my past. Before midnight, the phone rang. It was Megan Alvarez. "I just finished the electronic filing. Do you want to send it before the bank opens?" "Send it now," I said. "Timestamp it at 0001. I want it to be the first thing they see when the system starts." "Understood. About the will, I will need you to sign the second draft. This time, I recommend removing Grant entirely from all inheritance rights, even humanitarian clauses." "Good," I replied, not a single line under his name. After hanging up, I leaned back in the chair. Outside, the wind whipped against the window frame, sounding like someone knocking. I wondered, was anyone in the Harlow house awake? Did Grant dream of pushing me from my chair? Or was he sleeping soundly, believing an old man's dignity was worth less than a bank contract? I did not know, and I no longer cared. Around 1 a.m., the first message from Tobias appeared. "Ray, new info. I traced an investment under Grant's name for Lydia, Pinecrest Holdings. It was opened with funds withdrawn from the Foster Agricultural Fund. 45,000. No signature from you." I gripped the phone. 45,000 was not much to me, but it came from a private fund only I could access. I typed back, "You're sure?" 100%. I have the statement and ID showing that Lydia signed for you. Grant probably coached her. I'll send it by email." I sighed. So Trust 2 had its forged signature. I opened my laptop and checked Tobias's email. The PDF loaded 3 pages with the words, "Authorized signature R. Foster." The handwriting was not mine, but close. Grant had spent enough years watching me sign to imitate it, just convincingly enough. I hit forward and sent it to Megan with a short note. "Treat this as first evidence. Keep sealed." At 2 a.m., I opened another file, Insurance Beneficiaries, Cedar Hollow. In the secondary beneficiary field, Lydia's name appeared, followed by Grant Harlow. I changed it to Lydia Foster only. When the system asked for a reason, I typed violation of trust, breach of moral clause. I smiled faintly. Perhaps this was the first insurance record to cite morality as grounds for separation. I still remember sitting with Grant in the bank office the first time. He held Lydia's hand and told the loan officer, "We just need someone to believe in us." I had nodded and believed. Now, with that same hand, he had pushed me to the floor. Near 3 o'clock, I brewed another coffee and wrote in my notebook. December 26th, submit guarantee revocation. December 27th, file signature forgery claim. December 28th, Tobias completes Pinecrest report. December 30th, notarize new will. Each bullet point sounded like a nail driven into wood. Cold, firm, irreversible. Around 3:30, Megan called again, her tone low but edged with surprise. "Mr. Foster, I just got an auto response from Prairie State. It says, notice received and queued for processing. One more thing. Someone logged into your sub-account at the same time." "Mine?" "Yes. IP location, Des Moines. Are you using another device?" I squinted. "Des Moines. That's where Grant works. I suspect he's trying to withdraw delegated funds before the account freezes. I can block it." "No need," I said. Let him believe he still has control." Megan paused. "What are you doing, Mr. Foster?" "Nothing. I'm just letting justice prove its own weight." When I hung up, I leaned back again. The feeling was odd. I was neither angry nor calm. I was sharper than ever. Some men take a lifetime to learn whom to trust. I needed only one shove and one broken glass. Near dawn, I heard a rooster crow from a distant farm. I put on my coat, stepped onto the porch, and watched the cold sunrise spill across the white fields. The sun rose pale but sharp as a blade. I whispered, "Good morning, Cedar Hollow. We're going to have a long day." At exactly 8 o'clock, I drove to the bank. The snow had been cleared. The road was spotless, as if no one had ever walked there. Inside, the teller took my papers. "Are you sure you want to revoke all guarantees, including the Harlow mortgage?" "I'm sure." "And send a copy of the confirmation to Mr. Grant Harlow. I want him to know that from today on, the chair of honor at Cedar Hollow is no longer backed by my name." I signed, submitted, and stepped outside. The air was freezing, but my heart felt warmer than ever, because I knew that when Grant woke up, his phone would not stop ringing, and this time it would not be for Christmas wishes. When he opens his eyes, he will realize he hasn't just lost money. He's lost the shield he thought would protect him forever. My name. That Christmas night, the whole town was quiet. But inside my wooden house, the lights stayed on late. On the table, the foster fund files were neatly arranged beside Eleanor's old watch, the one I always took out to remind myself that some battles are not won by shouting, but by silent preparation. I got a message from Tobias at 10:47 p.m. "You should hear this." An audio file was attached. I frowned and started a video call. Tobias's voice was low and steady. "Ray, this recording came from the security system of the Black Oak restaurant in Des Moines. The manager there is a young man named Nolan Brooks. He said you once helped his family, years ago when his wife was ill, and the foster fund covered part of the medical cost. Tonight, while checking the VIP area cameras, he overheard two men talking about the foster fund. So he called me and asked, 'Tobias, does Mr. Foster know people are talking about his fund like that?' I just told him, 'If they're speaking in public, save the recording and don't interfere.' Iowa is a one-party consent state, so the record is legal. Listen." I played the file. The sound was grainy but clear enough. Grant's voice came through, low but distinct. "When Pinecrest merges, we'll gain access to the foster fund's capital. That old man doesn't know anything. His name is just decoration." Then Arthur's voice, deeper. "Grant, watch your words. I don't want a scandal. We do everything legally." "Relax, Dad. He won't dare do anything. He's afraid of making noise." I stopped the recording and sat in silence for a long while. Outside, a thin layer of snow covered the wooden sign reading Foster House, which I had carved by hand years ago. He was wrong. I wasn't afraid of noise. I just chose the right time to speak. Tobias texted again. I'm extracting the backup copy and keeping all metadata. Time, location, camera code. If needed, we can cross-reference with the restaurant log. I replied briefly, keep everything. Don't touch a thing. When the time comes, it will all be presented in the right place, at the right hour. I turned off the living room light, leaving only the dim glow of my desk lamp. In the half-dark, I opened the drawer and took out the bank authorization contract I'd once signed for Grant last year, when he didn't have enough credit to borrow $600,000 to buy the penthouse in Davenport. I had believed that helping your child once was a duty. Now I understand that sometimes faith itself is the knife that cuts you. I looked at the paper, then tore it in half and fed it to the fire. The pages curled, burned bright, and faded. Outside the window, snow kept falling. And inside me, a plan had completed itself to the last detail. When dawn came, the only one afraid of noise would not be me. Part 5, December 26th. The consequences begin. The next morning, snow buried half the driveway. Lydia said Grant was still asleep, drunk on the imagined victory of last night. I made coffee and opened the window. Cold air rushed in, carrying the damp scent of wood. Everything was quiet, except the wind moaning through the forest. But I knew that silence was only the overture to a chain of consequences. No one could stop. In Davenport, at 7:42 a.m., Grant's phone rang nonstop. River and Oak Commercial Bank called. First. The credit manager's voice was calm but sharp as steel. Mr. Foster, your $600,000 mortgage guarantee has just been revoked. Your co-signer, Mr. Raymond Foster, filed cancellation papers at the main office this morning. Grant shot up in bed, heart pounding. What? He can't... We already signed the contract. Sir, as co-signer, he has the right to withdraw before the credit reassessment period. By regulation, your loan is now flagged for temporary default risk. Will require additional collateral within 48 hours. The next call came from the life insurance company, where Grant had asked his father-in-law to co-sign, followed by the luxury car dealership, where his new Range Rover still appeared under late payment status. Everything hit like hail. Lydia stepped out, her hair disheveled, and asked softly, What's happening, Grant? He slammed the phone down. That crazy old man canceled everything. Damn it, he's trying to ruin me. Lydia said nothing, though worry flashed in her eyes. She had once thought her father gentle and weak, but no one is weak who has built a fund worth millions over 30 years. Meanwhile, I was sitting in attorney Thomas Baird's office in Cedar Rapids. A stack nearly 2 inches thick sat before us. Powers of attorney, loan contracts, and Tobias's recordings. Thomas signed the certification and said quietly, Ray, the first step's solid. The revocation is legal, and we have grounds to demand a full audit of Grant's transactions involving the foster fund. But are you sure you want to do this right after Christmas? I sipped my coffee and looked through the fogged window. There's no such thing as too soon when dignity's been stained, Tom. Sometimes silence should last only until morning. We signed 3 more documents. 1 to request internal reconciliation, 1 to notify the primary bank, and 1 letter, cold, short, addressed to Grant. As of today, all guarantees, authorizations, and credits signed jointly with you are revoked. I hold no legal or moral obligation to any project under your name. R. Foster. When I left the office, half the snow had melted, revealing the wet black road reflecting the pale sunlight. A sparrow flew past, leaving a sharp cry, like a period closing an old chapter. I knew Grant would now learn that justice needs no noise. It arrives through the precision of signatures and time. That noon, Tobias texted, Foster Fund shares up slightly. but Grant just got removed from the Pinecrest project director list. Insider source, I replied. Good. Everything's moving in rhythm. Stay quiet. In the afternoon, Lydia called. Her voice trembled. Dad, I'm sorry to call now, but I don't know what to do. Grant's losing control. The bank keeps calling. They say he owes taxes, and all the loans lost their guarantee. I was silent for a few seconds, then answered slowly, I told you. Long ago, Lydia. Don't let a man's pride drag the whole family down. If today Grant has to learn that lesson, then let him. As for you, take care of the children. Don't let them see this. The line went quiet. Then she whispered, her voice breaking, I understand. I just fear you'll never see him the same again. I sighed, looking out the window where snow kept falling softly. No one stays the same, Lydia. But sometimes, only after losing everything, do people realize what was truly worth keeping. When dust settled, I returned to the cabin, set the phone on the table, and turned on the old cassette player. Inside was the tape of Eleanor's voice from years ago, her soft rendition of Moon River on a winter night. That voice underscored everything I did, calm, slow, but never stopping. I poured a glass of whiskey and watched the fire. In the amber glow flickering on the wall, I saw Grant bowing to others, smiling falsely, unaware he'd just lost the most precious thing of all. December the 26th ended in absolute quiet, but I knew that in his world, every door had begun to close, one by one. 3 days after Christmas, no one mentioned the party anymore, but its aftertaste spread like an oil stain, unseen, only smelled. Grant called me 12 times. I didn't answer. For a man who once saw my silence as weakness, that very silence had now become the clearest verdict. The first update came from Tobias. River and Oakbank started freezing the subsidiary accounts. Grant's construction firm has been temporarily suspended. Some suppliers are demanding new guarantees or they'll withdraw. I just nodded. Let them withdraw. The sooner, the better. In Davenport, Grant was drowning in his office. Papers, contracts, error emails, and alerts piled up like a flood. His business account flashed in red. Pending verification. Access restricted. He slammed the desk, shouting, This can't be happening. I'm the CEO of Pinecrest. But his assistant lowered her head and whispered, You're not listed as that anymore, sir. Your name was replaced in the system this morning. Near noon, the landline rang. It was Arthur, his father. Grant sighed with relief, thinking he'd found a lifeline. Dad, I just need your help once. Just once. You can talk to the investment board. You can... Stop, Grant. Arthur cut him off, his aging voice cold as stone. I just got a copy of the Pinecrest minutes. You misused the foster fund name without Mr. Raymond's permission. Do you know what that means? It's a fundamental misrepresentation. I won't touch this mess. Dad, I just wanted to prove... No, you wanted to get rich fast, and now you're paying for it. Don't call me again. Fix it yourself. The call ended. Grant threw the phone, shattering it. In the luxurious room, only his ragged breathing and the flicker of fluorescent light remained, like a wound refusing to close. Meanwhile, across the state, I sat with Tobias and attorney Thomas in a small meeting room at Baird & Co. Thomas slid a thick folder toward me. Mr. Raymond, here's the 3-year financial reconciliation report. Every transfer Grant made from the foster fund to shell companies has been traced. There's about $182,000 unreported on his tax filings. We've prepared a report for the State Investment Oversight Committee. I opened to the first page, reading each line carefully. The numbers didn't shock me. I had already guessed. What made me pause was the final note. Subject may face corporate fraud investigation. I looked up. Keep it sealed until the end of the week. If they request verification, send the full raw data. No press release. Tobias nodded. When will you go public? I stared through the frost-coated window. When he thinks everything's calm. When people start believing the storm has passed. That's when thunder strikes. That afternoon, Lydia came to my house. She didn't bring the children, only a small bag and tired eyes. Dad, I came to speak for Grant. He has nothing left. The accounts are frozen, the company's sealed. Can you stop now? I poured her a cup of hot tea and set it down. Lydia, justice doesn't stop because someone cries. I'm not trying to destroy him. I'm restoring the boundary he crossed. But he says if you don't help, he'll be sued. I met her gaze. Sued for his own wrongdoing? Maybe that's good. Maybe for the first time in his life, Grant will understand the value of the word responsibility. You've heard me say since you were little. Lydia stared at me for a long time, tears running down her face. I know, you're right, but I still hope that when it's over you might forgive him, even just a little. I nodded softly. Forgiveness maybe. Forgetting, never. And remember, Lydia, when you forgive, it's not to save someone else. It's to keep yourself from sinking with them. That night, after she left, I stood on the porch watching the snow cover the narrow path leading to the road. Under the dim yellow light, her footprints pressed deep, slow, heavy. I knew they weren't just the steps of a daughter returning to her father's home, but of a woman walking away from the illusion of a man she once believed in completely. In Davenport that night, Grant sat alone in his penthouse. The phone no longer rang, his accounts frozen, his car repossessed, his company sealed, his partners gone. He opened a bottle of whiskey, filled his glass, but the drink did nothing. On the TV, a short news report appeared. The Iowa State Investment Oversight Committee has announced an investigation into the financial operations of the Pinecrest Project and related investments linked to the Foster Fund. Grant turned off the TV and dropped his head onto the desk. In the luxurious room, only the wall clock ticked slowly, each beat reminding him that every second of his former arrogance was now being repaid by reality. The news spread faster than any rumor. On the 10th morning after Christmas, the name Grant Foster appeared on the front page of the Midwest Business Journal. Expanded investigation into misuse of Pinecrest funds. Foster son-in-law implicated. Below it was a photo of him leaving the Pinecrest building, coat open, tie crooked, his face tired as camera flashes struck like blades. I was having breakfast when Tobias sent me the link. His message was brief. You don't need to act anymore. The public will do it for you. I folded the paper and set it beside my coffee cup. Outside, the morning fog was so thick it blurred the line of pines beyond the field. I remembered what Eleanor once told me. There will come a day, Ray, when a man must face his own reflection with no one left to blame. And this morning Grant was surely staring at that mirror. In Davenport, his phone was locked due to too many messages. First came a notice from the bank demanding asset verification. Next, an email from Pinecrest suspending his position. A few old friends in the investment circle left the group chats, none answering his calls. Even his father, Arthur, posted a short line on LinkedIn. I have no connection or legal responsibility for the actions of Grant Foster. All Moore Holdings projects operate independently and transparently. Within hours, Grant had become the name no one wanted to mention. Lydia told me later that at noon he ate alone at the same restaurant where he'd reserved the VIP table for 5 years. The old waiter pretended not to recognize him. When he tried to pay, his credit card was declined. He walked out silently, leaving the bill behind. Isolation didn't arrive with shouting. It came with the total absence of those who once surrounded him. That afternoon, Lydia came to see me again, this time asking for nothing, bringing only the 2 children. She rested her hand on her son's shoulder and said softly, Jacob, Isabel, say hello to Grandpa. The boy looked up at me, blue eyes like his mother's, and asked quietly, Grandpa, did my dad really do something bad? I knelt, meeting his gaze. Your dad made mistakes, Jacob. But mistakes don't mean the end. What matters is that you grow up never forgetting the truth. Isabel hugged my leg, her voice trembling. Please don't be mad at my dad anymore, okay? I stroked her hair and smiled gently. I'm not mad, sweetheart. Anger doesn't change anything. I just want everyone to learn what they need to learn. When Lydia led the children inside, she turned back, her eyes red. I want them to stay with you for a while. That house isn't peaceful anymore. Reporters, cameras, strangers, they come every day. I don't want the kids going to school carrying the Foster name and being pointed at. I nodded. Let them stay. This house was built for storms. And you? She hesitated, then said hoarsely, I don't know yet. Maybe I'll go back to Cedar Falls until things calm down. But I think Grant needs to be alone. Only in silence can he hear his own voice. That evening I took the children to the porch. The three of us sat by the outdoor fireplace. The snow had stopped. Only thin smoke drifted through the firelight. Jacob asked, Grandpa, why do people say justice comes slowly? I smiled faintly. Because justice doesn't chase anyone. It moves at its own pace. When you run from it, it still walks. When you stop, it arrives. Late that night, I went into my study and looked at the photo on my desk. Me, Eleanor, young Lydia, and Grant at their wedding, when he was still a passionate young man holding my daughter's hand under the autumn sun. No one in that picture could have imagined how everything would break apart. I took my pen and wrote a short line in my old notebook. When a son-in-law treats respect like a debt, the only thing a father can do is collect it in silence. That night, Grant drove out of the city. No one knew where he went. Lydia said she received only one text. Don't look for me. I need time to understand. When I read that line, I said quietly to myself, good. Loss teaches nothing. Only solitude does. 40 days had passed since the morning the Midwest Business Journal printed its first story. In the papers, Grant Foster's name had long been replaced by fresher headlines. Accidents, lawsuits, market shifts. The public had forgotten him. Yet sometimes forgetting is the cruelest verdict of all. No one knew where Grant was. Tobias said he'd withdrawn the remaining $4,000 from his personal account, then vanished from a hotel in Davenport before dawn on January 12th. The police weren't notified. No one had legal grounds to report him missing. Even Lydia only received a short, unsigned email. Don't look for me. I need to learn how to hear my own voice again. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger, only pity, not for him, but for the part of him that never understood what true silence was. Life at my house had settled into a rhythm again. Jacob and Isabel had grown used to the edge of the woods life. Online classes in the morning, helping me clear the yard in the afternoon, reading by the fireplace at night. Lydia called every week, her voice steadier now. She'd found temporary work in Cedar Falls as a project consultant for a small construction firm. I'm starting to understand, Dad, she said over the phone. When a man loses everything, the first thing he learns isn't how to stand up. It's how to see what he once stepped on. I simply answered, realizing that is already a beginning. That evening, as I was finishing the final report for the Foster Fund, Tobias called. Ray, you'll want to see this. He sent me a photo taken at a small gas station in Nebraska. In the blurry frame, Grant sat inside a pickup truck, coat zipped, beard unshaven. No trace of a CEO. Just a tired man pumping gas under falling snow. What's he living on? I asked. Working for a local freight company. According to a provisional tax file, $15 an hour. No one knows who he is. Looks like he's trying to start over. I stayed quiet. Part of me felt lighter. Another part hurt, not out of sympathy, but because I knew some lessons can only be learned in darkness, where the only light comes from within. A week later, Lydia received a handwritten letter. No return address, just the words, for Lydia and the kids. She brought it to me and set the envelope on my desk. I think you should read it first. I opened it. Grant's handwriting was still neat, still precise. Lydia, I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I just want to tell you that I understand now. I've lived 42 years without knowing my true worth. When everything disappeared, the car, the house, the reputation, the money. I realized the one thing I could never buy back was your father's respect. I used to think his silence was weakness. Now I know it's the only strength a moral man truly holds. I'm working every day not to atone, but to relearn how to live as an ordinary man. If one day the kids ask about me, you can tell them, your father once fell, and instead of blaming others, he stood up on his own. I don't know when I'll have the courage to face your father again, but if you can, tell him this. Thank you for not saving me. I stopped reading there, not out of emotion, but because in those shaky lines, I heard what every father hopes to hear. Maturity, not of age, but of understanding. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer beside the photo of Grant on his wedding day. One photo, two faces, one of faith, one of collapse. Between them lay 40 days of darkness, but sometimes it's within that darkness a man finds his way home. That night, after the children were asleep, I sat on the porch. Moonlight shimmered on the frozen lake, scattering silver across the snow. I poured a glass of whiskey, sipped slowly, and thought of Eleanor. You see, I whispered, the boy finally understands. We didn't have to say a thing. Time did its job. I set the glass down and watched the moonlight spread over the ice. For the first time in years, I felt true peace. Not because Grant had changed, but because I no longer needed him, to know that justice had been served. Sometimes, justice isn't found in punishment, but in the moment, the wrongdoer begins to learn how to live right. March came and the snow melted slowly. Along the road leading to the lake, the last sheets of ice broke apart into silver ribbons under the sun. Jacob helped me turn the soil to replant the lavender by the porch, while Isabel placed each small stem into the rows, humming softly. The sound of children and sparrows mingled like a promise that the new season had truly arrived. It had been nearly 3 months since I last heard Grant's name. No headlines, no emails, no messages, only the old letter in my drawer, where his trembling handwriting still carried the faint smell of ink blurred by cold moisture. I once thought that silence was the end, but life rarely closes its chapters neatly. One early April morning, Tobias called. Ray, I just got something. Someone applied for a part-time janitor job at St. Helena Chapel. The name's Grant Foster. Photo attached. I opened my phone. In the blurry picture, he was sweeping leaves, wearing a gray jacket and a cloth cap pulled low, beard rough and uneven. No trace of the CEO remained, just an ordinary man doing an ordinary job in a strangely peaceful scene. I nodded softly. Let him be, Tobias. Anyone who works honestly has already begun to be saved. That afternoon, Lydia came home. She brought apple pie and a stack of blueprints, designs for low-income worker housing, the project she was leading in Cedar Falls. I named the place Eleanor Place, she said with a gentle smile. I wanted to remind people of what you and Mom taught me, that dignity isn't in an address, but in how one lives. I said nothing, only placed a hand on her shoulder. Some things don't need praise, they just need quiet space to grow. That night, after the children were asleep, I sat alone on the porch. The thin moonlight stretched over the pines. Far away, a train whistle echoed from the south. I was about to go inside when I saw headlights flicker between the trees. An old pickup stopped at the gate. The door opened. Grant stepped out. He was thinner, his hair longer, brushing his shoulders, but his eyes were different. No anger, no fear, only the quiet humility of a man who knows he has nothing left to lose. I stood still, neither moving forward nor stepping back. He walked slowly to the wooden fence and spoke, his voice rough but steady. Sir, I didn't come for forgiveness. I came to return something that used to be mine. He reached into his bag and pulled out the old watch, the one I'd given him on his wedding day. I kept it like I was holding on to the illusion that I deserved it. But I was wrong. It belongs here now. I looked at the watch. Its glass was scratched, but the hands were still ticking. "Why today?" I asked. "Because today is Mother Eleanor's Memorial Day," he said. "I was at St. Helena this morning, helping clean the grounds. I saw the roses bloom, and I understood. Some things only bloom again when winter is truly over." I said nothing. He placed the watch on the fence, bowed deeply, and turned away. No plea, no promise. I let him walk to the gate, hearing his footsteps crunch softly over the gravel. When the truck engine started, I finally called out, "Grant!" He stopped and turned. "Do you know the only thing I regret?" He shook his head. "That I let you believe honor could be taken away. It can't. It's only forgotten, until you find it again yourself." He stood still for a moment, then nodded, eyes glistening in the moonlight. "I won't forget, sir." The truck drove off, its tires grinding over the gravel, leaving a sound that was small, steady, and strangely warm. I picked up the watch from the fence, feeling the faint warmth of the hand that had just placed it there. The second hand still moved, steady, calm, and sure, as if time itself had been waiting for the man to change and catch up. I looked up at the night sky and whispered to Eleanor, "Winter's truly over now, my love." Summer came earlier than usual. The fields behind my house turned a soft green, sunlight pouring through the window like liquid honey. Jacob was almost as tall as I now, and Isabel had begun learning the violin. Her first notes trembled and wavered, yet within them was something real, the kind of music no flawless piece could replace, the effort of a soul growing up. I lived quietly. Each morning I rose before 6, made coffee, and wrote a few lines in my journal. Weather, progress of the fund, sometimes a quote from Eleanor. At my age, life asked for nothing more than calm. Yet, as always, justice finds its way back, not through storms, but through the scent of summer. One June morning, I received an envelope from the Des Moines City Council. On its cover, bold letters read, "Guest Speaker, Ethics and Philanthropy Forum." I chuckled. 10 years ago, they dismissed me for being too old-fashioned. Now they wanted me to speak about integrity in investment. Perhaps the world only believes in virtue after it's witnessed the cost of forgetting it. I agreed, not for pride, but because I knew someone would be listening quietly. The event was held at the Grand River Hotel. Noon light streamed through white curtains, casting shadows across rows of polished seats. When I stepped onto the stage among all the formal faces, I saw Grant, sitting in the back row. No suit, no watch, none of the sharp look of a businessman, just an ordinary man, silent, attentive. I began without notes, my voice steady. "I'm not here to talk about success. I'm here to talk about loss. Because only when we lose something do we learn its worth. We don't need more money. We need more honor." The hall fell silent. I continued. "I once lost my family because I forgot that justice begins with oneself. But the blessing is that sometimes justice doesn't destroy. It simply lets you live long enough to learn again." When I finished, the room stood in applause. At the back, Grant rose too, not clapping, just bowing deeply. I nodded in return, saying nothing. Between us, forgiveness had long happened. It just no longer needed words. That afternoon, Lydia met me in the lobby, smiling, her eyes clear. "You spoke beautifully, Dad. I saw Grant sitting in the back. He didn't talk to anyone. He just kept watching you." I looked toward the street, where sunlight spilled across golden maples. Sometimes the best apology is living differently. Lydia nodded, holding her folder close. "Eleanor Place got approved, Dad. Construction starts next month. Grant said he'll join as a technical supervisor, no pay." I smiled softly at her. "Then justice has returned at last, not through punishment, but through purpose." That evening back home, I opened the wooden drawer and took out the watch Grant had once returned. I wiped its scratched glass. The hands still moved, steady and sure. Perhaps that's why I kept it, not for memory's sake, but as a reminder that time never stops, even when we lose our way. Later that night, as I sat on the porch, I heard a truck stop at the gate. Grant stepped out, silent, and placed a small wooden box on the steps. When I opened it, inside was the architectural plan for Eleanor Place, with a handwritten note in the corner. "Every brick here I want to lay with my own hands." I smiled, folded the plan, and looked up at the sky. Above, the first star had appeared. "Eleanor," I whispered, "the seed you planted long ago has finally begun to bloom." The inauguration of Eleanor Place took place on a bright August morning. Along the newly paved red brick road, blue flags and white ribbons fluttered gently in the wind. Rows of small cream and oak houses stood side by side like bricks in a lesson. There are things money can't buy, only rebuild through sincerity. Lydia stood at the podium, holding the microphone. Her white blouse, neatly tied hair, and calm smile gave her the poise of someone who had learned strength through loss. Beside her, the two children in their uniforms held bouquets of purple lavender, the flower their mother had loved most. I sat in the front row next to the mayor and several members of the funding council, but none of those titles mattered to me. My eyes were on the back of the crowd where Grant stood, his work shirt stained with lime, sweat beading on his forehead, calloused hands resting at his sides, and a quiet smile like sunlight breaking through clouds. Lydia began, "When we started this project, many said it was just a dream, but my father once told me, anything built with heart will be protected by time. Today, this housing complex isn't only named after my mother, Eleanor. It's proof that love and justice can coexist." The applause rolled through the crowd, deep and rhythmic like the sound of waves. I saw Grant bow his head when she spoke the word justice. There was no shame anymore, only acceptance. When Lydia called him to the stage, he walked slowly, carrying a brick engraved with the words, "Respect builds everything." Isabel smiled and whispered, "Dad, I want to place that one." Grant knelt so she could set the first brick beneath the porch of house number 1. Beside them, Jacob helped smooth the mortar, his small hands steady. I stood watching, feeling that everything once broken was being mended, not by cement, but by compassion. When the ribbon was cut, Lydia came and embraced me. "Dad, thank you for believing. If you hadn't drawn the line that day, none of this would exist." I smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Justice isn't meant to punish, Lydia. It's meant to make sure kindness still has a way home." That afternoon, after everyone left, I walked down the main road of Eleanor Place. Children's laughter echoed from the playground, and the smell of apple pie drifted from a newly opened kitchen window. Grant was still there, cleaning up tools with the workers. When he saw me, he straightened and said quietly but firmly, "Sir, thank you for letting me set the first brick," I replied. "No one can rebuild the past, Grant, but anyone can rebuild themselves. What matters is, this time, you built it with your own hands." He nodded, looking around the completed homes, his eyes shining with genuine emotion. "I'll stay here a while," he said. "Teach the kids some craft work. Maybe this is where I belong." I patted his shoulder. "Yes, and maybe this is where time has finally forgiven us." As the sun set, the new houses glowed a soft gold. On the wooden sign at the gate, the words, "Eleanor Place," a project of dignity and hope, gleamed in the dusk. I stood there for a long while, listening to the breeze move across the roofs, the faint ring of the last hammer against wood, and I knew the storms had all passed. 10 years had passed since the day Eleanor Place was inaugurated. This autumn, Iowa was ablaze with gold. The maples by the lake looked like slow-burning torches, their light scattering across the small wooden house where I lived. I was 80. Everything in this home remained in its old order. The desk, the leather chair, the wooden box that once held Grant's watch, and Eleanor's framed photo on the wall. Only one thing had changed, the laughter of the children, now no longer children. Jacob had just turned 23 and was studying architecture. He was helping design the second Eleanor Foundation community. Isabel was in Chicago, studying music, sending me a new violin recording every month. Lydia, my daughter, now leads what used to be the Foster Fund, now renamed the Eleanor Foundation, operating in 3 states, helping hundreds of families find housing and learn trades. And Grant, the man once shunned by everyone, now stood among the project's leaders, without title or nameplate. Everyone simply called him Mr. Grant. He oversaw construction, taught apprentices, and lived in a small beige house at the heart of the development. I had visited once. It was simple and neat, with one photo on the table. Our whole family together on the first inauguration day years ago. One September afternoon, I received a letter from Jacob. Grandpa, next week I'll present the design for Eleanor Place 2. I placed a small bronze statue by the gate, engraved with your words, "Justice doesn't need noise. It only needs time." Dad Grant says, if you agree, he wants to lay the foundation stone with you. I smiled, folding the letter. Sometimes the words we speak in anger become the truths others protect for life. On the day of the new project's inauguration, they invited me to attend. In the square, hundreds gathered, many once homeless, once broken like Grant had been. Now they wore Eleanor Foundation shirts, held hard hats, and smiled as music played. In the front row, Grant and Lydia stood together. His hair had turned gray at the sides, but his eyes were calm and bright. When he saw me, he approached, bowed, and said softly, "Sir, I never thought we'd come this far." I replied gently, "No one knows how far they can go until they've stopped once." Jacob brought me the foundation stone. Together, Grant and I placed our hands on it and lowered it into place. The fresh mortar smelled of wet cement. The first hammer strike rang out, deep, steady. The crowd applauded, not loudly, but long and even, like a shared heartbeat. That evening they held a small celebration. Under warm lights, Lydia raised her glass, voice trembling with emotion. Today we didn't just build houses. We rebuilt the way people look at one another, with respect, not judgment. And it all began with my father's silence. I looked up. In the distance, Eleanor seemed to smile among the glowing maples. Grant came near and placed in my hand the old watch I had kept. "You've held on to it long enough," he said. "Now it's my turn." I looked at it, the hands still ticking, slow but sure. I nodded and gave it back. "Then it belongs to the man who values time more than anyone else." That night, when I returned home, I sat on the porch and watched the moon stretch across the lake. The silver light spread softly, beautifully. In the breeze I heard faint violin notes, perhaps Isabel. The melody was Moon River, the song Eleanor once sang. I closed my eyes and smiled. No regrets, no anger, only the stillness of a life that had come full circle, from loss to justice, from justice to compassion, and from compassion to forgiveness. I set my journal on the table and wrote the final line. People think silence is weakness, but for a father, sometimes silence is the loudest way love can speak. Then I closed the notebook and listened to the sound of Grant's watch ticking faintly in the distance. It was still running, like life itself, never stopping, only changing course. People say justice arrives when the gavel strikes, but I've learned something else. Sometimes justice arrives through the silence of the one who was once hurt. 10 years later, everything had changed. The old house was now the Eleanor Foundation headquarters. The once barren land was full of laughter, and the son-in-law, who was once arrogant, now taught others how to rebuild their lives. No revenge, no victory. Just the quiet moment of seeing someone finally understand that itself is justice. And if you're listening now, maybe you too have been hurt, disrespected, or pushed out of your own home by those you trusted most. Don't rush for revenge. Sometimes the right silence makes the whole world correct itself. My name is Raymond Foster, and this is the last story I'll ever tell. Not to make you cry, but to remind you that true justice doesn't need noise. It only needs time. If you believe dignity is worth more than money, if you've ever had to stand alone at the table of contempt, then subscribe to this channel. Turn on the notification bell and tell me what city you're listening from. Because every story here is a reminder that silence isn't weakness. It's the strength of those who've lost everything and still chose to rise with dignity.